There comes a time in all aging men's lives when we lose stamina and find lasting longer than a minute or two extremely difficult. It can be embarrassing, hard to accept, and sometimes can make you feel extremely angry and bitter, thinking back to when you were in your prime and could go for hours at a time, day after day without much thought. I'm talking about playing video games, people. Keep your minds out of the gutter. So for today's episode, we're embracing the fact that we're all getting older, and be it for time pressures, family commitments, or simply not having the motivation to play for an extended period, and so we're taking a look at games which are designed for short bursts, for those of us who struggle to perform for more than a few minutes at a time. Again, I'm talking about games, but if you're suddenly bombarded with ads for magic pills, I apologise, and you can direct your significant other to this very video as the pure reason, whilst resting assured I'll be grateful for the added views as always. The first game that springs to mind is Wetrix, which was a 1998 release. Developed by Z2 and published ironically by Ocean, it made a small splash on the Nintendo 64 by not only being one of the cheapest games released, but also has the title as the console's most pirated game due to the fact that it was so small as a ROM file, it could actually be emailed as an attachment in AOL emails even in the dial-up era. Unwanted credentials aside, this game will obliterate you from the very start. Even after completing the training, this game is incredibly challenging and will test your reflexes as well as your brain in this fast-paced formation building, water dropping, bomb dodging and rainbow seeking title. Sounds weird? Yes it is. And as hard as it looks, it's also incredibly addicting. A later version was released on the Dreamcast titled Wetrix Plus, but this N64 release is one of the console's most unusual titles. Will you play it every day? Certainly not, but it's one oddity that you may find yourself coming back to for one more try every so often. If you can last for more than a minute or two in this title, you're doing very well, and if you play on Pro mode, you're probably talking easily under a minute, unless you put some serious time into practice play. Asteroids Hyper 64 is another one of those obscure titles. This time though it's obscure because it's not really that good, and often feels more like a flash game you'd play in 2001 during your lunch break at work. This one was developed by Cyrox Developments and published by Crave, and the fact that you've probably never heard of the studio making the game should tell you everything you need to know about this game. It's a visual update to the arcade classic from years ago, but it doesn't really do anything here that stands out. If you like Astroids, then you'll likely enjoy this, but even at the time of the game's release, everything about it just seemed incredibly dated and underwhelming. What also makes matters worse is that although it has some nice backgrounds, it actually makes playing the game harder, as often small asteroids which you need to blow up can blend into the scenery and then suddenly smash you to pieces by surprise. With dull visuals, dated gameplay and sounds which are straight from a stock CD of space sound effects, there's really not much here to enjoy, but hey, if you like Asteroids then go party like it's 1999 all over again. Dr. Mario 64 is perhaps my least favourite Nintendo created title on N64, and that's a shame as I normally like first party games and whenever one is announced, it used to go straight onto my wish list. This one though, not so much. Coming out in 2001, it was very much a filler title, and the whole concept just lends itself to short bursts of playing. If you're into tile matching games or puzzle games in general, it's interesting enough. The Nintendo characters in the game are a welcome point of interest, and combined with the remixes of classic Nintendo music, it presents a decent overall package, but maybe it's just me, but playing this for anything more than a few minutes just makes me question my life decisions. The game box asks you to catch 4-player fever, but for me this is about as fun as gonorrhea, and aside from capturing footage, I never returned to this title for pleasure. 5 minutes recording this was enough for me, and I suspect it may be the case for many of you watching too. Elmo's Letter or Number Journey Adventure or whatever it's called is an easy 1-minute game to suggest. Simply for the fact that I'm not 4 years old and I've already mastered counting to 10 and my A to Zs. Actually, there'll probably now be a thread in the chat about how it's actually A to Z and how my Britishness has triggered you, but I digress. You can actually complete the game in about 20 minutes, but for anyone post-puberty, and from my channel stats that's about 99% of you, then the only time you'd want to spend more than a minute in this game is if you're locked in a psych ward, and this is the only game they have for its non-threatening and intimidating aura. Iggy's Wrecking Balls is finally something more interesting to take a look at. Coming from everyone's favourite partnership of Iguana Entertainment and Acclaim, this one hit store shelves in 1998 to a whimper, despite it having a bit of a niche following even to this day. It was an off-the-cuff pitch to Acclaim by Jules Watsham, which was initially rejected, and I've no idea how Acclaim could have rejected the idea of animal balls with grappling hooks and a puzzle platform racing game as being something the general public didn't want. But 2 weeks later, with the help of some programmers working on a tech demo, it was shown to Acclaim and they changed their minds. A short 12-month development cycle was all the team had, and then it hit store shelves, and if you're into one-of-a-kind games, then this really is quite a cool title to look at. It reminds me of Uni Rally and Putty Squad in short bursts, and it's actually pretty darn fun. In multiplayer, if you have friends, it can lead to some interesting battling as you try to grab each other with your balls and then wriggle each other around. Okay, I'm stopping there, but there's, over 100 races, some of which are like 30 seconds, and so it's a game which is perfect for short blasts, and the controls are simple enough that even if you don't return to it often, you can pick it up and play no problems at all. Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero is a game which I'm going to talk about until I die. I mean literally die in the game itself. It was released before Christmas in 1997 and was the most returned to store video game after the Christmas period it was released in. It got terrible reviews, gamers hated it, and it killed off what was supposed to be an epic expansion series of the Mortal Kombat universe. There we go, I'm dead. Lasts longer than a minute in this horrible game and you've done well. Just don't play it. Namco Museum is a retro compilation which, if you're old enough to remember, will take you back to the heyday of arcades when mullets dominated and a flock of seagulls controlled the airwaves. There's 6 arcade classics here, each of which are ideal for short bursts of gameplay. You get Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, which is very ahead of its time being the first trans video game character, Galaga, Galaxian, Pole Position and Dig Dug. It was supposed to be the first in a series of Namco Museum games on the N64, but when people realised they were paying a hefty retail price for what was essentially 6 very dated arcade games with no updates, it didn't really sell well, and so this was the sole Namco Museum release on N64. Each of the games are suited to 60-second plays, meaning that after 6 minutes, you can put the game back in its box, stick it on your shelf like a true collector to only ever look at it, and then play something that's actually enjoyable. Robotron 64 is a cool one which came from Player One and was published by Crave or GT Interactive depending on where in the world you live. Originally it was due to be a 1997 release from Midway, but they scrapped it, which was what caused a 12-month delay whilst a new publisher was found. It's a multi-directional shooter, levels typically last under a minute, and there's a whole ton of levels to play through. Whilst this has that classic arcade Robotron feel, it's nicely updated to include better visuals and not forgetting that insane techno soundtrack which sounds straight out of an illegal rave coming from an abandoned Liverpool warehouse. What most people remember fondly here is that it had a unique control method which lets you plug in 2 controllers and use each hand's analog stick to play. The left to move your character and the right to aim your shooting. It's incredibly well done, and with over 200 levels to blast through, it's a game which you can always come back to even if it's just for a few minutes to try and push your way through to the next level. The graphics are nothing to write home about, but the sheer speed of the game, especially once you get past level 100 or so, is top notch. This is one to play if you've not already done so before. Now here's an anomaly. Star Soldier Vanishing Earth is a superb title and one which many people seem to have never played. So take this as your warning to go out and play this, as it's a whole ton of fun. What makes this one stand out aside from the awesome gameplay is that there's actually a 2-minute mode and a 5-minute mode right on the title screen. These modes are exactly as the name suggests, giving you either a 2-minute or a 5-minute high score challenge mode to blast your way through. Whilst the full arcade mode is the ideal way to play this game, and it is a great romp from start to finish, you could always argue that the timed mode here is perfect for practicing or trying out a new ship to play as. Ignoring that, if you're just short on time or if you haven't got the patience to do multiple attempts at completing the challenging game, then this could be a great way to kill some time hitting that all important high score and learning the scorekeeping mechanics. Finishing off is Space Invaders. Woo, another modern take on an arcade classic. We went from one great space shooter to a frankly dull one, Space Invaders on Nintendo 64 is about as bland as things get, with gameplay barely moving on with the times. It does have that familiarity from the arcades and some new features like bosses and power-ups, but the overall gameplay is too slow paced, and quite frankly after a minute in a game you'll quickly realise that spending another 60 seconds in this release really isn't going to bring you much that you haven't already seen. So just do yourself a favour and dodge this one. So that's my roundup for games which are designed for short bursts, and maybe they're ideal for the TikTok generation with microsecond attention spans, and that's something I can say, at least at the end of this video, as they'll definitely not be watching at this point. So for today's topic of conversation, I want to know what's the shortest time you've played a game before realising it was absolutely trash, and either returning it to store or just never playing it again. I think that FIFA 64 is one of those titles for me, and although I got it on Christmas Day, I don't think I ever actually played it after that, and perhaps the only reason I even played it for more than 5 minutes on Christmas Day was because it was a gift and I didn't want to come across as an ungrateful twerp. But as always, thanks for watching, and until next time.